Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into how to find top talent in South Korea.
Oh, this is exciting.
It is. And, South Korea is obviously a major player, globally renowned for its innovation, and it has like a really, really skilled workforce.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but as with any global market, right, there are always going to be some nuances that you need to navigate to be successful, especially when you're talking about recruitment.
Yeah. And what's really interesting about South Korea specifically is that it has just a ton of online recruitment sites.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So you have your global players, like,
Indeed. But then you also have like huge local platforms like Saramin and Incruit.
Okay. So like Korea specific.
Exactly. Like just for that market. And it can be, even for me, and I've been doing this for a while, it can get a little confusing.
Yeah.
So for companies that aren't familiar with the landscape, it can be like, trying to navigate a maze. So if I'm a business and I want to tap into this talent pool, where do I even begin? And what about the legal side of things? Is it super complicated to hire in South Korea?
All right, so let's talk about the legalities, because that's where things can get a little tricky. One really important thing to remember is that you can't just, employ or dispatch staff using like your foreign company.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's actually not compliant with Korean labor law.
Interesting.
Yeah, so you would actually need a local entity, which means setting up a whole new company within South Korea.
Okay, so you're saying like if I have a company in the U.S. and I want to hire someone in Korea, I can't just do that through my U.S. company?
Exactly. You'd have to have like a Korean subsidiary.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, so it gets a little complicated.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty significant hurdle for businesses, especially smaller ones that maybe don't have the resources to just, open up a whole new company in another country.
Right. And that's where a solution like INS Global comes in, because they specialize in helping businesses expand into South Korea. Specifically when it comes to, navigating these really kind of complex legal requirements.
Interesting.
They act as your partner on the ground. So, you don't have to worry about setting up the entity yourself.
Okay.
They make sure everything is done by the book.
Gotcha.
And it just makes the whole process so much smoother and easier.
So it seems like they're really all about like simplifying what seems like a pretty daunting process.
Exactly.
So how does working with INS Global actually work? What can someone expect if they, decide to partner with them?
They have like a super personalized approach. So it starts with, really understanding your company's specific needs.
Okay.
And we're talking about, like your company culture, the exact skills you're looking for in a candidate, even like personality traits that would thrive in your team.
Right.
And they use that really deep understanding to craft a completely custom recruitment strategy for you.
So it's not just like posting a generic job ad on Indeed and hoping for the best.
No, not at all. It's much more targeted than that. And this is where their local expertise really shines, because they understand the nuances of the Korean job market in a way that, most foreign companies just don't.
Right. That makes sense. So they're not just sticking to online platforms.
No, they have this huge network, both online and offline.
Right.
So that gives them access to like a much wider pool of candidates than you would get just from, posting on job boards.
I imagine that's really valuable, especially when you consider that sometimes the best candidates aren't even actively looking for a job.
Right, exactly. Like those passive candidates.
Yeah.
They might be perfect for a role, but they're not necessarily browsing job boards,
Right. So how do they actually reach those people?
Well, they might tap into professional networks or attend industry events or even do some targeted headhunting.
Wow. So they're really going the extra mile.
Exactly. It's about being proactive and finding those hidden gems who might not be easy to find otherwise.
That's amazing. So what happens once they've actually found some potential candidates? What's the next step?
They basically guide you through the entire process. So they'll help with things like scheduling interviews.
Okay.
They'll help you kind of, navigate the selection process.
Gotcha.
And they'll even help you craft a job offer that's appealing and competitive within the Korean market.
So they're really with you every step of the way.
Yes. Exactly.
That's fantastic. But what about the legal side? We talked about how tricky Korean employment law can be. So how do they ensure that everything's above board and that you're not, accidentally breaking any rules?
That's another area where they really excel. They have like super in-depth knowledge of all the Korean labor laws and regulations, and they make sure that every single aspect of the recruitment process and the onboarding process is completely compliant. So you can minimize any risk for your company,
Gotcha. So they're like your legal guardian angel in the Korean job market.
Exactly.
They've got your back. That's great. So they find the right people. They handle all the logistics. They make sure everything is legal. It all sounds almost too good to be true. So what makes INS Global really stand out from other companies that might, claim to do the same thing?
I think it really boils down to their deep understanding of the Korean market. Like, they've got this proven track record of success across various industries.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, from tech and engineering to import-export and even life sciences. So it's not like they only specialize in one thing.
That's impressive.
And this breadth of experience is so valuable because it gives them this unique edge in understanding the specific needs of different sectors.
So they're not just a one-size-fits-all solution.
No, they're really tailoring their approach to the industry and the specific company they're working with.
That makes sense. And do they do anything beyond just recruitment?
Oh, yeah. They offer this whole suite of services to support businesses in South Korea.
Like what?
So like payroll outsourcing, setting up
Right.
your local entity if you need that, and even like managing your employees once they're on board.
So it's like a full package deal.
It is a complete solution.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so we always like to see the proof in the pudding, right?
Mm.
Do we have any examples of companies that have actually worked with INS Global and seen tangible success?
Yes, absolutely. There's a great testimonial from Manuel Ramos, who's the managing director of Terrio Asia, and he raves about their effectiveness and how much they really understand the Korean market.
That's great to hear because, it's one thing to talk about these services in theory,
Right.
but it's much more impactful to hear from someone who's actually experienced them, firsthand.
Absolutely.
So what stood out to you most from his testimonial?
He really emphasized how valuable their expertise was when it came to navigating the complexities of setting up a business in a challenging market like South Korea.
Right.
And he highlighted how INS Global support allowed them to focus on their core business goals because they knew that all the HR and legal stuff was being handled by experts.
That peace of mind has got to be invaluable for any company.
It is, especially when you're expanding into a new market.
Especially one that's as, potentially complex as Korea.
Absolutely.
It's funny, we talk a lot about how technology simplifies things,
Right.
but sometimes it can create more complexity,
Yeah, for sure.
Like thinking about all those online recruitment sites we were talking about in Korea, it can feel super overwhelming, especially for someone who's not familiar with the language or the, local customs.
It's true. Even for me, and I do this all the time.
Yeah.
I still sometimes feel like I'm lost in this sea of websites. And, even with global sites that have Korean versions, you might not get the same level of, local insight that a company like INS Global provides.
Yeah, it really seems like having that human element, that expert guidance, is like the key to unlocking success in a new market.
It really is. Technology can connect you with potential candidates, but it's that human understanding of the cultural nuances and the local context that truly makes the difference.
And that's where INS Global really comes in.
Exactly. They bridge that gap between, technology and human expertise.
So if South Korea is on your horizon for, business expansion, it sounds like you don't have to go it alone.
You don't.
INS Global offers a complete solution for finding and managing top talent, and that can really simplify your expansion and increase your chances of success.
And what I find really fascinating about them is that they don't just help you navigate the complexities, they actually help you tap into the immense potential of the Korean job market.
Right.
So partnering with them allows you to really focus on what matters most, which is, growing your business.
That's a great point.
They handle the hard stuff and you get to focus on your strengths.
That's fantastic. So if you are ready to take that next step, remember to contact INS Global today and tell them about your expansion project. They're ready to help you make it happen.
Absolutely. And just remember, the Korean job market is dynamic and full of incredibly talented individuals. And INS Global provides that bridge to connect you with that amazing talent pool and build a team that can really help propel your business forward.
I love that. That's a great way to put it. We've covered a lot in this first part of our deep dive, exploring, the ins and outs of recruiting in South Korea and how INS Global offers a solution that really seems to address a lot of the challenges that companies face.
It's been a fascinating exploration.
It has indeed. But we're just getting started.
We are.
In part 2, we'll go even deeper into the specific services that INS Global offers and how they can benefit your business. So stay tuned.
Looking forward to it. Welcome back to our deep dive into recruitment in South Korea. We were talking about INS Global, and what's interesting to me is they're not just another recruitment agency. They're really focused on building these long-term, sustainable relationships with their clients.
That's a really good point. We've talked about kind of the what and the why of INS Global, but now I'm curious about the how, like what exactly makes their approach so effective?
I think a lot of it comes down to their commitment to creating this custom-built recruitment strategy for each client. They don't believe in that one-size-fits-all approach. They spend time really understanding your specific company culture. The nuances of the role you're trying to fill, even like the personality traits that would thrive in your team environment.
Oh, wow.
It's about finding that perfect fit, not just, filling a position.
So it's like a tailor-made suit.
Yeah.
Perfectly fitted to your company's requirements.
Exactly.
I love that analogy. But okay, so how do they actually go about finding the right candidates? We talked about their vast network. What does that look like in practice?
Well, they utilize a really diverse range of resources. So they definitely have like a comprehensive database of pre-screened candidates, but they also go beyond that. They leverage social media professional networks, and they even conduct targeted headhunting campaigns for those really hard to fill roles.
Okay.
So, they're not just sitting back and waiting for the right candidate to come along, they're actively seeking them out.
So they're casting a wide net and really leaving no stone unturned.
That's a great way to put it.
That's impressive. But what about the onboarding process once they've actually found those ideal candidates? We know that Korean employment law can be quite complex. So how do they ensure a smooth transition? Both for the company and the new employee.
Yeah, and that's where INS Global's local expertise really shines because they handle all of the legal and administrative aspects of onboarding.
Okay.
So from drafting compliant employment contracts to making sure the correct paperwork is filed, they take care of everything, and they're so well versed in Korean employment law, you can be confident that everything is done according to local regulations.
That's great. And I imagine they help set up payroll and benefits and all that stuff too.
Oh, yeah, they handle all of that as well. They take that burden completely off your shoulders.
That's awesome. Yeah. Sounds like they're really striving to streamline that entire process, which I imagine is a huge relief for any company that's expanding internationally, especially one that's, new to the Korean market.
Absolutely. It takes a lot of the guesswork and the stress out of the equation.
I can imagine, but I'm curious, once the employee is onboarded, does their involvement end there, or do they continue to provide support?
Their support is ongoing, so they offer continued assistance throughout the entire employment life cycle. So they can assist with things like, performance management, payroll processing, even help navigate any tricky HR issues that might arise.
So they're there for the long haul.
Exactly. It's about building a lasting partnership, not just a transactional relationship.
So it really is a comprehensive solution, from finding the right talent to managing them effectively within the Korean context. I could definitely see the appeal for companies looking to expand into South Korea. It sounds like it would save a lot of time, money, and potential headaches in the long run.
Oh, absolutely. And it's not just about convenience. INS Global's deep understanding of the Korean market and their commitment to legal compliance can actually save companies significant resources down the line.
Right, because if you make a mistake, that could be really costly.
Exactly. And when you're operating in a foreign market, having that trusted partner who understands the nuances can make all the difference.
That's a really good point. Yeah. We often associate outsourcing with cutting costs.
Yeah.
But in this case, it's also about mitigating risk and ensuring that everything is done correctly from a legal standpoint.
100%. It's about protecting your business.
Which is invaluable for any business, regardless of size or industry.
Exactly.
So it allows companies to really focus on their core business objectives, whether that's innovating, expanding their product line, or strengthening their market presence.
Right. INS Global takes care of all those complex HR and legal details in the background so you can dedicate your resources to what matters most.
So I'm hearing a consistent theme here: peace of mind.
Yes.
It sounds like that's one of the biggest benefits of working with INS Global. You have that peace of mind knowing that your HR needs are being handled by experts who are familiar with the local market, so you're free to focus on your strategic goals.
I think you hit the nail on the head, by handling all those intricate details of recruitment, onboarding, and ongoing HR management. INS Global empowers companies to really concentrate on their core business objectives, knowing that their employees are being taken care of and that everything is legally sound.
Speaking of legal compliance, you mentioned that one of the biggest risks for companies hiring in South Korea is misclassification of employees.
Right.
Can you unpack that a bit more? What exactly does that mean, and why is it so important to get this right?
Yeah, that's a critical point. So, in simple terms, misclassification happens when a company mistakenly categorizes a worker as an independent contractor when, legally speaking, they should be classified as an employee.
Okay.
It's actually a pretty common issue in a lot of countries, but it's particularly important to be aware of in South Korea because their labor laws are very specific and they're very strictly enforced.
So what are the potential consequences of getting this wrong? I imagine it's not just, a minor administrative oversight.
No, the repercussions can be quite serious. A company could face significant fines. They could be required to pay back taxes. They might even face legal action from the misclassified worker.
Wow.
So it's a situation that can cause a lot of damage, both financially and, to your company's reputation.
That's definitely a risk you don't want to take. It sounds like a legal minefield for companies that are unfamiliar with the intricacies of Korean employment law.
It can be, yeah, which is why it's so beneficial to have that expert guidance from a company like INS Global because they have such a deep understanding of the nuances of the law, and they can ensure that, all your workers are classified correctly from the start, and that minimizes your risk and protects your business in the long run.
It sounds like proactive risk management is a key part of their service.
It definitely is.
It's not just about finding talent. It's about doing things the right way and protecting your business from potential legal pitfalls.
Exactly. And they understand that compliance is not just a box to tick. It's an essential part of building a sustainable and ethical business.
Right.
It's about creating a win-win situation for both the company and the employee, making sure that everyone is treated fairly and that everyone is operating within the boundaries of the law.
I really appreciate that holistic approach.
Yeah.
It's not just about ticking boxes and filling out paperwork. It's about taking a long-term view and building relationships based on trust and mutual benefit.
That's one of the things that I think really sets INS Global apart. They're invested in the success of both their clients and the employees that they place. They're not just filling roles, they're fostering connections that can lead to long-term success for everyone involved.
It's great to see a company that's not just focused on the transactional side of recruitment, but on, creating a positive impact for everyone involved.
Absolutely.
We've talked a lot about the legal and administrative aspects of INS Global Services, but what about the human side of things? How do they ensure that they're finding the right cultural fit, both for the company and for the employee?
That's a really important part of their process. They go beyond simply matching skills and experience on paper.
Right.
They really take the time to understand the company's work culture, the team dynamics, even those personality traits that would thrive in that specific environment. So they're not just finding someone who can do the job, they're finding someone who will excel and feel at home in that company culture.
And that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Because a happy employee is a productive employee.
Precisely. And they're not just, matching resumes, they're matching people and cultures.
Yeah.
And it's about finding that sweet spot where both the company and the employee benefit from that relationship.
So it's a win-win.
Exactly. It's about creating a win-win scenario where everyone can flourish.
I love that approach. It's so much more than just, transactional recruitment. It's about building those long-term, mutually beneficial partnerships.
And that's a core part of their philosophy. They see themselves as this bridge between companies and talent. Yeah. Creating connections that have the potential to lead to lasting success for everyone involved. So it's about creating this positive ripple effect that extends, beyond the initial placement.
It's inspiring to see a company that's so dedicated to creating those win-win situations, for both their clients and their employees.
It is.
It's not just about the bottom line. It's about building a more positive and sustainable way of doing business.
And it speaks to their deep understanding of the Korean market and their commitment to ethical and sustainable business practices. They're not just focused on those short-term gains. They're playing the long game and building relationships that can thrive over time.
It's become clear that INS Global is more than just a recruitment agency. They're a true partner for companies looking to navigate the complexities of the South Korea job market and build, successful, thriving teams. They're not just filling positions, they're building bridges and fostering connections that can lead to, long-term growth and prosperity.
I completely agree. They're providing this comprehensive solution that takes care of all those little details so that companies can focus on what they do best. Innovating, expanding, making their mark on the world. They're removing those barriers and paving the way for businesses to tap into that incredible potential of the South Korean market.
It's been really fascinating to kind of delve into the intricacies of INS Global Services and learn how they're helping companies unlock that potential of the South Korean job market.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground from the challenges of navigating Korean employment law to the importance of finding the right cultural fit. We've explored their unique approach to recruitment and how they're helping companies not only find, but manage top talent in South Korea. But the journey doesn't end there.
It doesn't.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We spent the last 2 parts really digging into the world of recruitment in South Korea and exploring how INS Global is making a difference for businesses that want to expand into this really exciting market. But I think now comes the most exciting part, hearing from the people who have actually worked with INS Global.
I agree. We can talk about the services and the approach, but nothing beats hearing from companies who have partnered with INS Global and have seen firsthand how their services have helped them in their expansion.
Exactly. So let's get into those real-world examples. We mentioned it before, but we have a testimonial from Manuel Ramos, the managing director of Turo Asia.
Manuel's testimonial is a great example of how INS Global helps businesses navigate a complex market like South Korea. He specifically talked about their deep understanding of the local landscape and their ability to provide custom solutions. He mentioned how hard it would have been to try and handle everything themselves, especially the legal and regulatory stuff.
So it sounds like they really took a lot of the pressure off and provided that expert guidance that you need when you're entering a new market. Did he mention any specific challenges that Turo Asia faced and how INS Global helped them overcome those?
He talked about how valuable their expertise was when it came to actually setting up a business in South Korea. Like they helped them establish a local entity and made sure everything was compliant with Korean regulations. And that allowed Terror Asia to focus on their business goals instead of getting lost in the paperwork and legalities.
That's a great example of how they simplify what can be a pretty overwhelming process. But it's not just about the legal side, right?
Yeah.
Did Manuel talk about their ability to find the right people too?
Oh, yeah. He was really impressed with how INS Global took the time to really get what Turo Asia needed. They didn't just send over random resumes. They found candidates who were qualified and also a good fit for the company culture and the specific team they were joining.
That's something we've talked about throughout this whole deep dive, the importance of cultural fit. It's not just about skills. It's about finding someone who will actually thrive in that work environment. And it sounds like INS Global gets that.
They definitely do. They understand that a successful placement is about more than just ticking boxes on a resume. It's about finding that synergy between the person and the company. And in Manuel's case, they clearly found that. He was really happy with the team they built in South Korea and how well they fit into Turo Asia's global operations.
It really shows that they're not just filling roles, they're building teams and creating connections that could last for years. I know Turo Asia is just one example, but I'm sure there are tons of other companies that have worked with INS Global. Do we have any other stories that show the range of their services?
Oh, yeah, there are a lot. One that comes to mind is this tech startup that wanted to expand into South Korea. Their big challenge was finding really specialized engineers with a very particular set of skills.
I can imagine that's a nightmare for tech companies, especially in a market like South Korea, where everyone's looking for the same talent.
No, I know.
So how did INS Global help them? Did they manage to find those engineers?
They did. They used their network and their knowledge of the tech industry to find a whole group of highly skilled engineers that matched what the startup needed. And they didn't stop there. They also helped with visas, relocation, and all the logistics of getting those people to South Korea.
So they were really a partner in the whole process.
That's amazing. It sounds like they were really hands-on to make sure the startup could succeed in South Korea.
That's right. And it worked. The startup was able to build a strong engineering team in South Korea really quickly, and they launched their products successfully. It's a great example of how INS Global helps companies of all sizes to expand internationally and reach their goals. It's inspiring to see how they're helping businesses of all sizes tap into that potential in South Korea. These stories really bring to life everything we've been talking about, their expertise, their commitment to finding the right fit, and how dedicated they are to their clients' success.
They really show what INS Global brings to the table. Whether you're a huge company or a small startup, they have the knowledge and the resources to help you build a great team in South Korea.
I think we've explored a lot in this deep dive, from the challenges and the opportunities in the South Korean job market to what makes INS Global unique. We talked about their services, and we heard from companies that have actually worked with them. Hopefully, our listeners now have a better understanding of what it takes to find and manage talent in South Korea and how INS Global can help.
It's been a great discussion. We've covered so much: the complexities of Korean employment law, the importance of cultural fit, and the benefits of having a partner who really knows the market. INS Global is so much more than just a recruitment agency. They're a true partner for companies that want to succeed in South Korea.
I totally agree. And the big takeaway here is that You don't have to figure this out all alone. INS Global has the knowledge and the experience to help you succeed.
So if you're thinking about expanding to South Korea, reach out to INS Global today and tell them about your plans. They're ready to help you find amazing talent in South Korea.
That's a great way to wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We hope you found this helpful, and we can't wait to dive into another interesting topic with you next time.